Hi everyone, it's Darlene. Welcome back for card number 3 in my video series, One Stamp, 4 Designs, 4 Mediums. Today I'm going to be using distress markers as my medium. Here's the stamp set. It's called Spring Flowers by Simon Says Stamp. And here is the card that I'll be creating with watercolor. So I'm going to start by taking my stamp set. Here it is, and I'm going to be using this flower over here on the left, and I'm just going to be repeat stamping it all over my card. I also wanted to show you this new stamp set I bought by Technique Tuesday. It has some really fun envelope stamps. This is a random act of kindness, a little hey to brighten your day. I thought it was a really cute set that I wanted to share with you. I wanted to show you the watercolor paper I'm always using. It's the Canson Mixed Media XL. I thought it'd be helpful to show you the cover. It's 98 pound. I've cut a piece that's 4 1/4 by 3 3/4. The reason why I like it so much is because it's bright white. Okay, so I'm going to take some VersaFine Black Onyx Pigment ink and I'm going to randomly stamp these all over my panel. Notice I started in the middle and I worked my way out. It's much easier to get them positioned kind of evenly, sort of, but in a random pattern when you start in the middle. Otherwise, you might get stuck with a hole in the middle. So I'm just kind of rotating it here and there and making sure I cover the entire piece of cardstock. And I didn't use anything underneath, so I got a lot on my craft mat, which is a brand new craft mat. I don't know if you noticed, but it's so nice. And I just wiped it with just a wipe of my absorber here that I got from Amazon, and it's what I use to clean my stamps. It's really easy, and you just need water. You don't need a special stamp cleaner. The reason I used black pigment ink is so that I could clear emboss this. And I really like using an embossed image for watercolor because it helps me stay in the lines. I'm going to use 3 color combinations for my flowers. The first is Twisted Citron and Salty Ocean. Then I'm going to carry that Twisted Citron to the next one and use Squeezed Lemonade and a little dot of Pine Needles. And then I'm going to take that lemonade and move it into my third flower so I have consistency in color, and I'm going to combine that with some Broken China. I like to plan my watercoloring before I actually do it, so I'm going to label these 1, 2, and 3. So see how there's a 1 and a 3 here, so I'm going to make the one next to that a 2. I've got a 1 and a 2, so I make that a 3. I've got a 1 and a 3, so I make that a 2. And I'm just making kind of these triangles of 1, 2, and 3. And then I'll assign one color combination to all my 1 flowers, another one for number 2, and another one for number 3. By doing this ahead of time, I make sure that I don't end up with 2 flowers that are the same color right next to each other. So I think it's worth taking the extra minute or 2 to plan everything out ahead of time. All right, once I get these all labeled, I'm going to move into my watercolor. So I have my Ranger Artist brushes. I'm using number 2 here. It's the smallest, I think, brush. And I've also got some water that I'm going to put off to the side here, but I'm going to color first. So I'm going to take my Salty Ocean and my Twisted Citron. That's going to be my first color combination. And I'm going to color the inside of all the petals with the Salty Ocean and then the outside of the petals with the Twisted Citron. And I'm just making sure I stay in the lines. You can touch the 2 colors together if you want. You can leave a little bit of space. You can experiment with different amounts of each color, and I'm going to be doing that with the other ones. So I decided for this flower I was going to color them all first and then watercolor them. You could do them one at a time. I just thought it'd be easier to just color them all and then watercolor them all at once. So I know you guys have seen me do this tapping with the watercolor. And I'm doing that on the first couple of petals, but I found that it was really blending the colors too much. Maybe it had to do with the particular colors, the markers that I was using, but I found that if I just laid my brush flat and sort of wiggled it around a little bit, I got a much better blend and I could still see both of the colors. So as I move along here, I'm sort of improving my technique, and I'm not even going vertically. I'm just kind of horizontally wiggling my brush, laying it flat, and always keeping it in the same direction. So wherever it hits the blue for the next petal, I hit that same brush area with the blue. I'm also keeping a tissue off to the side here because I'm getting some water on the handle of my brush and I don't want it to drip onto the rest of my cardstock. So now I'm sort of figuring out here, so I'm laying it down flat and just sort of wiggling back and forth, and that helps me to get both the Twisted Citron and the Salty Ocean into this flower petal. I'm going to speed through the rest of these. I'm just doing the same thing on every single petal. One thing to keep in mind too is you want to put water on the entire petal. So if you don't put water on the entire petal, then you're going to get a lot of water staining, and then there'll be areas that or maybe a little bit different because they weren't blended with water. And you want the whole flower to be the same. So I'm just going to make sure I get water all the way to the edge and cover it on each of these flowers without going outside the lines. After I finished watercoloring all the petals, I went back and kind of looked at them to see if they had any water stains. And I do want some water stain, but I didn't want it to be really prominent. So I just dropped a little bit of water here and there because the distress colors will reactivate with the water and give me a little bit of a better blend. So I did that on a few of the flowers. Now I'm going to move on to flower number 2, which is going to be Twisted Citron and Squeezed Lemonade. So I'm going to do about half and half. I colored all my number 2s with the Twisted Citron first, and then I went back and colored all of them with the lemonade. Because these colors are so close together and they blend pretty evenly, I decided to go and add a little dot of pine needles on the inside of all the petals, and it really gave it a really pretty pop of color right there in the center. All right, now I have them all colored with the markers. I'm going to take my brush and do the same exact thing. So I've got some water on it. I'm going to lay it down and wiggle it back and forth. And so if the edge of my brush is in the center of the petal, then that's why I keep rotating my paper so that I don't kind of twist it around. So now the bottom of my brush is at the top of the petal. So I just want to be consistent with my application of water on each one of these petals. So you can see how pretty that green looks right in the center. And you could use a third color on the other ones as well. I just thought that this one definitely needed it. But you can experiment with different colors and see what you like the best. So next I'm going to work on number 3s, which are Squeezed Lemonade and Broken China. I wasn't sure how this was going to go with these two colors, so I'm just going to do one flower first to see how it works out, and then I'll adjust for the next ones. So for my first flower, I'm going to do half Squeezed Lemonade, half Broken China. And notice that the blue's on the outside this time, just for something different. And then when I dropped in the water, you'll see that, oh my gosh, the whole thing just blended and became kind of this greenish blue. I tried using less water, I tried using more water, I tried, just a little bit of wiggling, but it seemed like the colors just immediately merged together. So I'm glad I didn't color them all first and then apply water to all of them like I did with the other ones. So for my second try, I decided to add less, about 1/3 of the Broken China, and then the rest yellow. But even then, it was definitely a little bit more yellow, but it just was still blending a little bit too much for me. And I want all these flowers to be different, so it's okay that I'm experimenting with this. For the last one, and I decided I was just going to do this on all of them, I colored all of the Squeezed Lemonade, and then I went and added just a tiny little tip of Broken China on all of the flowers, and then I went and watercolored them, and I got the perfect amount. And also, I don't know if you noticed, but the tip of my brush is on the outside of the petal versus I was doing the tip of my brush on the inside of the petal. I'm not sure it made a difference, but definitely you can see a lot more of the Squeezed Lemonade with just a tad of the Broken China. So just experiment and see what you think looks good, but do your experimenting on the actual card because I think it looks good to have a bunch of different colors. All right, after I let that dry, I erased all of my numbers, and now I'm going to work on the background. So notice that I did not color any of the leaves that were dotted. In the other cards I've been doing, I've been coloring the dotted petals the same color as the flower. For this one, I'm going to leave them white, so I'm going to color some black soot on my background to make those white petals stand out. Rather than using the marker, I'm just putting some ink on my craft mat and picking it up with my brush. I just want it to be a very light gray background, and I'm using that same number 2 brush. And notice that I'm just working in the corner of the ink that I put on my craft mat. I'm just pulling a tiny little bit at a time, and I'm using mostly water. It's better to get a light color on first. You can always add more color. It's a little harder to take it away. Although if you do have a situation where you need to take it away, just drop some plain water on it and then use a tissue and it'll usually pick up most of the color. So I really fast forwarded this part. It probably took me a total of about, I think it was 8 minutes or so to color the whole thing. But you can see how pretty those white petals look with the dark background. I pulled my sentiment from this circle saying set by Simon Says Stamp. It was just the perfect size, happy birthday. I stamped it on some black cardstock with Versamark ink and sprinkled some white embossing powder on it. And then I trimmed it out. Now I noticed, I think there's something wrong with my stamp because it didn't fully stamp the Y and the exclamation point. So I'm gonna grab my white gel pen, which is a broad tip, so I have to be really careful. I'm just gonna kind of dot in the missing pieces here, and it seemed to work out just fine. So I kind of stamped it so that it was off center. I'm going to put my watercolor panel on a folded piece of cardstock on the top side, on the folded side. And then I'm going to use my tape runner to also put down my sentiment. I'm going to put my happy birthday a little bit to the right, just so it doesn't look so even. So I'm just going to put that right up against my watercolor. And I cut it extra long so that I would have some flexibility in where I put it, and then I just cut it off at the end. And now I've got one last step. I have these enamel accents by Ranger. This is black. These are really, really old. Like mine is particularly old, like several years. And so and I think that's probably why it's so syrupy. It's very kind of gluey. So if yours is like that, the trick is to kind of squeeze it out a little bit in the center and then pull upward, like directly upward, and hold it. Maybe I probably held mine about 5 seconds. It does take quite a while until you break the kind of line that's sticking between the paper and your nozzle. So it did take a little bit of time here to do all of these centers, but I thought it really made the flowers pop off the card. And that is card number 3 in this series with distress markers. So I hope you enjoyed that, and I will see you next time for card number 4. Thanks for watching.